Okay, let's start at verse 11 here. In 73, we got like 4 or 5 verses in this passage just to try and identify the image a little clearer. So in 11 and 12, somebody want to read that?
They say, would God know? Does the Most High know anything? This is what the wicked are like, always freed of care. They go on amassing wealth.
Okay. And they're at ease. Mine also says they increase in riches and they're always at ease. They say things like in 11d, you said, how does God know? Is there knowledge in the Most High? There was a passage somewhere in the New Testament that I don't know if Jesus says it, somebody else says it, the same kind of things, and I can't remember who it was. But anyway, so these are people that kind of live life their way, that aren't really concerned with the intricacies of God and whether God is watching or whether he knows. They're at ease, and they seem to increase in riches here.
This reminds me of like people are like turned off by church because of the people in the church, and they look at them and they're, doing so well, but really they're not good Christians. Do you know what I mean?
It could
That's
be.
what it reminds me of.
Yeah, right.
They do really well, but they're not really good Christians. And people look at them and go, what is wrong with me? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
That's what this person in here, the Psalm of Asaph.
Yeah, Asaph. Whoever that is.
Asaph?
Asaph.
Yeah. I don't know. How would I know?
So anyway, so 17 and 18 here. Until we get to this point, until.
When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply till I entered the sanctuary of God.
And.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I supposed to be reading this? Until I entered the sanctuary of God, and then I understood their final destiny. Surely you place them on slippery ground. You cast them down to ruin.
Okay, so somehow he sees from God's perspective here and recognizes either their latter end, meaning either they're going to die, or maybe he's taken a bigger picture of what ultimately becomes of them somewhere thousands of years off in the future, that God has something waiting for them, and they're cast down to destruction. That's the big thing here. And you guys have already read Daniel, but they're cast down to destruction. And somebody read 20 again.
They're like a dream when one awakes. When you rise, Lord, you will despise them as fantasies.
He despises their image. And then just turn to 27 or go down to 27. And it tells us who God despises here.
Yeah.
Those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. 28.
Mine says them that play the harlot, departing from them. And we know who the harlot represents in Revelation, right?
Yes.
Well, you know what? When I read this stuff, I think of those big wealthy churches that preach prosperity. So what they really worship is what this talks about. Wealth, riches, not God.
Right. It's not about the relationship. It's about what can you do for me?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. With that in mind, 2 other verses before we get back to Daniel, which I think speak exactly what you guys are talking about. At least one I think does, but Ezekiel 7:20.
What was it?
Ezekiel
7:20.
Oops. Let's see the full page. 720.
Want me to read it?
Sure.
Ezekiel 7:20. They took pride in their beautiful jewelry and used it to make their detestable idols. They made it into vile images. Therefore, I will make it a thing unclean for them.
Mm.
All right, so this seems to suggest somebody that was seemingly of God, but they took the things that God had given them and made them unclean, almost as if they're worshiping whatever the image of the abominations, and God views it as a detestable thing. And Ezekiel 16:17.
I am.
So Ezekiel 16:17. You also took the fine jewelry I gave you, the jewelry made of my gold and silver, and you made it for yourself, male idols, and engaged in prostitution with them.
What?
This is so Ezekiel was a prophet to Israel. And Ezekiel was sent by God to say to Israel, you know what? You don't worship me anymore. You worship everything else and you worship idols. So he went out and prophesied to Jerusalem as an adulterous wife. Jerusalem was not following, they weren't following the God of Israel, they were following another God. So that's what he's talking about. When he says prostitution, he's talking about you prostituted yourself, you gave yourself to somebody else, to another, you were somebody, you were my bride, but you gave yourself to another God.
You became a harlot.
Yeah.
Right, and a harlot, of course, ties back to Ezekiel's job is the same as Daniel is almost interpreting a thing that God has showed Nebuchadnezzar, because Nebuchadnezzar is metaphoric, seemingly metaphoric, of the harlot that the church in its latter end seems to become.
Mm.
And so he's saying, just like all of these places, when they refer to these images, they seem to be good, but ultimately, it seems to be almost as if God's allowed them to take the things that he's given them and they've create, like any of us might do,
Mhm.
but God's people do is make an image out of it.
Right.
But anyway, Daniel 2, back to Daniel 2:32 through 35. And by the way, that's the same thing that Jesus said to the people when he came. He was
Mhm.
talking to the harlot. He showed up with the harlot, and, so
32.
through 35, yeah.
The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken into pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth.
Okay, real quick, image that I got a picture of. Are you guys able to see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so we seem to see the top is gold, the head.
right.
The arms and chest were the silver. The bronze seemed like it included the belly, and it said the thighs.
Mm-hmm.
And then down, so now to me, the thighs are to right above the knees-ish. That's how I view it, but here they have the thighs as being silver, but the words say the thighs are part of the bronze and the two lower legs are iron, right? And then
Yeah.
the last part of the mixture between the clay and the iron, right?
Right.
It's belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its
Yeah.
feet partly of iron, partly of baked clay.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I see it, yeah.
So let me see if I can get rid of the, how do I get rid of the thing I just shared? Hold on.
Stop sharing your screen.
Oh, stop sharing. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
2,000 times a week.
Okay, so the stone who's cut out without hands strikes the feet break, then the iron and clay, brass, silver, and gold break too. According to these verses, they become like chaff of a summer threshing floor. What does that mean? They become like chaff of a summer threshing floor.
When a threshing floor is a floor that in the old times they would put down to, like, it's like a rug, but it kept it, like, that's how they kept it clean. They put that in there. I don't know why. I always worried about it myself when I read about it.
I
But
thought it was separating the wheat from the chaff, and the
Yeah,
chaff would fall
yeah.
through and they collect the wheat.
They used to beat the wheat and get the wheat kernels off, and then the rest was useless, and that's the chaff.
okay.
And it blows away. Yeah.
So, right, so the sun, now, here's an interesting thing. It refers to it as a summer threshing floor.
Mm.
And I forgot to look this up. There's one of those things I was busy looking, referring back, but there's a difference, I think, between a summer threshing floor and a fall threshing floor, like maybe the end of summer. Now, maybe it's not saying this, but there are, in God's crop or God's field, there are things that mature earlier. We've talked about that before, like, for instance, barley would be one of them. So that might become, in maybe like a May, June, it might come to be harvested there versus like maybe wheat or something that is, more harvested in the fall. So, and now that I think about it, I forgot to look up, is he making a reference to the summer or the early harvest or a late harvest? I don't really know, but in essence, they throw the wheat or whatever it is up in the air. They hit it with some threshing instrument. It separates the chaff. The wheat seem to be heavy. The chaff blows away. And it makes mention of there's no place found for them. The wind blows it away. Of course, we know who the wind would be, right? We know who the brass, or we know who the rock is, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. My guess is the wind would represent the spirit who blows it away, and there's no place found for him. And this mountain or rock fills the whole earth, or fills the earth. We don't have to turn here, but Jesus refers to the Pharisees in Matthew 21. He says, "Therefore the kingdom of God shall be taken from you and given to a nation bringing forth fruits. He that falleth on the stone shall be broken to pieces, but on whomever it falls, it will scatter him as dust."
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
Jesus is the stone, obviously, and anybody that it falls on, I think it scatters them, versus, I guess, if you fall on him, you're broken, but you're broken to pieces. But if he falls on you, it seems like the these things in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it just blows you away. It's fallen on you and you're worthless.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't know if you're going to go into this, but the statue itself represents from Nebuchadnezzar all the way to Jesus's time, there were some major kingdoms that this represents. You know, the gold was Nebuchadnezzar, the next kingdom came, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom went away, morphed into a different kingdom. And those are the times and the seasons I think Daniel was talking about. But by the very end, right before Jesus's time, there was a mixture of the clay and the iron, was it? Clay and iron. And then when Jesus came, and it's really weird because a lot of people have done studies on the actual kingdoms. And this prophecy, this statue was so significant because it took history all the way up to Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And clearly Jesus was the rock
Right,
at the very end
right.
of the prophecy.
Yeah, well, before we go into interpretation, we'll just finish
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we read it already.
no, it's, I mean, I know that's a common.
Way to jump ahead, Dab.
Yeah, no, that's cool. No, because that ultimately is one of the common interpretations of it as well. But let's do 36 through 38 and see if we can finish the dream, the interpretation part of what Daniel describes it, and then maybe we'll have time to do the you know, what the common theories are of which that you're right, that is one of them. Somebody want to do 36 through 38?
Sure. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold.
Is that it? Okay. In verse 36, it says, we will tell the interpretation. I wonder who we is.
I don't know. Do you think he had his friend standing there with him?
That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, you need moral support.
I would
He
want.
probably said, you guys are going with me. I'm not going by myself. I might have this interpretation, but we're standing together. Together we live, together we die.
Together we fall, right?
Together we fall.
So Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold, the King of Kings in verse 37. The God of heaven has given the kingdom. What kingdom? God of heaven in verse 37 has given him the kingdom. I'm curious as to what kingdom you think he's referring to.
Kingdom on earth. That one. Just that particular kingdom.
I don't see where it says kingdom in 37.
Ours says dominion. and-
His translation.
Power and might and glory.
Let's-
On your-
Maybe
my-
dominion? No.
The God of heaven hath given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. Okay, so he's given whatever that means, the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory,
Dominion.
and dominion. But
No, that's
what is it? What is he giving them? Just Babylon? Or some of those
I don't
nations?
know. I wondered this. What did the world look like back then? Was it limited to this small area? Yeah, Corinne says yes.
Well, it is according to those that wrote the books, the Bible.
Yeah.
A lot of the history books that we read, but I'm sure there were people in the Far East and probably in America, they'd probably be Indian. I don't really know, but what's God
When they-
given? Go ahead.
That when they write as if this is the whole world.
They
Yeah.
do write that way. You're right. It's different.
So what kingdom do we say? Are we just saying he gives them Babylon and maybe the authority that he's given them to conquer Judah, maybe Egypt, maybe some of those nations in that general area?
Probably. Because they're all together, right?
They were close. Yeah, they're close to one another. All right, in verse 38 then, it says they're given rule over wherever children of men dwell, beasts of the field and the birds of the heavens. They're given into his hands, and he's made to rule over them. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Let's make a, let's see if this verse helps us to interpret that. Ezekiel 31, 12 and 13. Because God speaks in these weird metaphors that we think we understand them, but he puts the detail in and he makes you say, I think I know what this is talking about. And then he turns, makes a right turn and goes in another direction. So
What is
31,
it there?
31, 12 and 13. Actually, make it 11, 12 and 13.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
You want to start with 10?
Yeah, because the great cedar towered over the thick foliage, and because it was proud of its height. I gave
Read
it-
out loud, Dee.
Oh, sorry, I was just reading it to myself. That's how I get. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says, because the great cedar for the thick foliage, and because it was proud of its height, I gave it unto the hands of the ruler of the nations, for him to deal with according to its wickedness. I cast it aside, and the most ruthless of foreign nations cut it down and left it. Its boughs fell on the mountains and valleys. Its branches lay broken in all the ravines of the land. All the nations of the earth came out from under its shade, and it left it. Am I done?
Is that 13?
No.
And
all the bir-
13.
all the birds settled in the fallen tree, and all the wild animals lived among its branches.
Okay, now remember, we've read passages where birds are in the trees, beasts are in the field. And Jesus spoke about the tree that man took and put in his own garden, remember?
Yeah.
And that seemed to be representative of which nation?
Babylon.
Babylon. So here Nebuchadnezzar's the head of gold, and it seems as if in Ezekiel he's also referred to as what, a great cedar or something? Or
Yeah, a great cedar.
so God uses all these metaphors almost to confuse you if you're not sure, but he seems to be referring to a similar thing here. But Babylon is the head of gold that has the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and I guess wherever children of men dwell. I looked that phrase up and I couldn't find that tied in with the beasts of the field. So I assumed, I just looked at the beasts and the birds and found this passage, which seemed to speak of the exact same thing. So again, yeah, it's weird, as it's as if so far God may be referring to the national, I should say the physical, Babylon, the physical Nebuchadnezzar. And then, of course, we get into the other kingdoms following it, but he's also using this as a metaphor to speak to seemingly where men take the image of God. And at first, it's beautiful. It's got the gold head, and it seems to be great. And then let's go back to Daniel and continue before I jump too far ahead. 39 through 43.
Who's that?
After you, another kingdom will rise inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were, am I supposed to be continuing?
Through
41?
43.
Through the
Just
end of
as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom, yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay.
Okay, so gold is Nebuchadnezzar or Babylon, who's the head. The silver is a lesser kingdom than Nebuchadnezzar, breast and arms. The brass is 3. I'm assuming it's even less of
Yeah.
a kingdom. Belly, thighs. 4 is iron. Lower legs, I'm assuming it continues to decrease in value. Lower leg, it's strong. Now, this is confusing to me. I know this may be a metaphor of the Roman Empire here. It's strong, it breaks in pieces and subdues, and it breaks and crushes. It breaks in pieces and crushed. And then we have lastly, the toes, or the feet and the toes, or whatever, iron. But it mentions it's mixed with potter's clay. What is potter's clay in the Bible a lot of times refer to?
Us.
Yeah, because who's the potter?
God,
Yes.
Jesus.
Right.
God is.
And typically the miry clay, I remember we used to sing a song in Penssaw.
Should we sing it now?
He something my feet in the miry clay. You remember that song, right?
I don't,
He set my feet on the rock to stay. I can picture Calvary.
Yeah, me too.
I liked Calvary.
Me too. But anyway, so again, there's metaphors here that refer to the iron and the clay, but then miry clay, it's part strong, part weak, mixture. It doesn't adhere, and it mixes with the seed of men, which again is confusing the way it's being spoken of. But the bottom line is the iron and the clay don't seem to adhere to one another. Whatever that means. Now, we could say, yeah, these are just natural things, but we see the starting off of the image that slowly decreases in value until it gets to the feet, in which it's all but, worthless, because the iron and the clay don't support everything that's on top of it.
Right.
So we have 10 minutes. Okay. Deb, you had said this is considered the common interpretation of this dream. Up to this point, this could represent the nations that include Babylon that ruled the areas of the world. I think you had said, do you remember what nations you're referring to? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What, the nations in history you're talking about?
Yeah, like according to the interpretation that people would say about what follows Babylon.
The Medes and the Persians.
Right. Followed by,
Macedonian Empire,
I think, is Greece.
which is probably Greece.
It is Greece.
And then the Roman Empire,
Right.
and then a bunch of empires, punch kingdoms come after that really don't mix well, that
Right.
fight a lot.
Right. So this, up to this point, it could be we haven't gotten to the very end, and we don't have a whole lot. We have 3 verses I want to read. Could be God giving over to his spiritual kingdom to Babylon here for his reason. Or it could be some unknown plan of God that we don't quite understand, because I think a lot of what we understand in the Bible is just a small little fraction of what God does and what his plan is. But if we could just finish off the 44 through 46.
Somebody read.
I'll read. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end. But it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. This dream is true and its interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him.
You might as well just, actually, you know what, real quick. So Jesus was the stone that God seemed, the references God sets up in the days of these kings. It won't be destroyed. The sovereignty won't be left to another people. And it shall break in pieces all the kingdoms mentioned, gold, silver, brass, iron, and then the mixture. And it will last forever. Okay. So God shows Nebuchadnezzar the interpretation. We don't know why. Now let me ask you a couple questions before we can finish the last 3 verses off. And we'll probably talk about this next week because there's more to this. Does Daniel really interpret the dream for Nebuchadnezzar?
No,
Why?
God interprets the dream through Daniel.
But does God or Daniel really speak the entirety of the dream?
No, the depth of it,
Right.
no. He doesn't tell him about Jesus coming, does he?
Well, he hides it. Again, there's a lot still hidden in the dream that Daniel refers to, but it doesn't seem as if somebody doesn't seem to really care. They're really only concerned about their portion of the image,
Yeah.
right?
Like they're only really concerned about what the dream was and what it meant. Okay, now we know, now we can go on.
Or now, as long as I'm the head of gold, right?
Yeah, like, oh, I'm the gold piece.
He doesn't seem to pay much attention to who follows him. He doesn't seem to follow down, and he certainly doesn't really show a shred of interest towards, wait a second, what's the stone that's going to fall down and destroy the entire
Right.
image, and it's going to leave absolutely nothing. He doesn't seem like he really cares about that. He only cares about his part. So there's much here that's still left that, you know, I feel like we're going to spend a little time on it next time. But somebody want to read 46 and 49?
Sure. Wait, let's make sure Megan's not, oh, the baby's sleeping. Meg, do you want to read?
Yeah, I can read. What was it? 40?
46 through 49.
Okay. The king Nebuchadnezzar wait, did we read that? Prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, you said to what?
To the-
Oh,
to the
to the
end.
end.
Yeah.
Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court.
Okay, so they're ushered into positions of prominence. The 10-day period, again, if they respond correctly, elevates his people, like we saw last week. Now, anyone notice that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are referred to with their Babylonian?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Is
kept
that because-
thinking, why is that?
Why?
I mean, if they're going to call him Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they should be calling him Belteshazzar
Right,
Yeah.
along with it.
right. I wonder why. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe
I don't know.
maybe it's a sign of respect or something for his position.
Was that after they changed the language?
Their names.
Yes, because earlier they're referred to
Yeah,
with
maybe.
their Judah names, Meg. But here they're referred to with their Babylonian names.
Yeah.
But Daniel never really is up to this point. He's always
Wow.
Daniel.
Right.
Now,
I
we-
It
never
will
heard-
be. And well,
I don't remember that other name that Daniel was called. I don't understand.
Belteshazzar.
Belteshazzar.
I know, but I don't remember it from our teachings.
Yeah, it was in the beginning.
It was in
No,
last.
I mean, I remember it from today. I don't remember it from when we were younger.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's 'cause he
Yeah,
wasn't
we
It was
always call
always
them.
Daniel,
by-
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Right.
Always.
Right, so we always called Daniel by his Hebrew name, and we always called the other three by their Babylonian names.
right.
Weird, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
one last thing is we have barely 2 minutes. In Acts verse, this is a verse. I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna read this verse. Here's the verse, Acts 17:29. Being then the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the God is like unto gold, silver, stone, graven by art and device of man. So we certainly could rule out that this represents God or God's, spiritual good kingdom on the earth.
Mhm.
So
Right.
it certainly could represent the natural kingdom, of which history says, yeah, it's definitely probably that, although Jesus doesn't, some of the implications at the end where Jesus comes and his kingdom's established and he sets everything in order and takes control or something like that hasn't occurred yet. So maybe God pauses for his own reason here. But another thing that I looked up was, and we'll talk about this next week, is verses. There's a bunch of verses that have gold and silver, brass and iron that are not related to this image. All right, there's probably 12 to 14 or 15, and maybe 3 or 4 of them are part of this chapter. But and I'll say this real quick because we're getting ready to cut off, but there's a story within a story just looking at those 4 metals, and we'll talk about it next week.
Cool.
Commercial.
So we'll talk about that next week, and then we'll move on to chapter 3 to see if because it's insightful to read, because it's nothing that I'd ever heard taught before.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we'll go from there.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks so much,
All
Dare.
right, guys, have a good night.
Have a
Love
good night.
you.
Love you guys. Bye,
Bye, guys.
guys.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.